Good day. So, in this lecture we are going to continue our discussion on wavelength division multiplexing. Specifically, we are going to talk about routing and wavelength assignment. Routing and wavelength assignment to what? Well, routing and wavelength assignment means that we have some stream of packets or whatever data or whatever communication is going on from one source to one destination. Now, these sources and destination, first of all, one thing is of course a point to point connection. If there is a point to point connection, they directly send through the fiber, that is simple. But in general, they will not be directly connected, they will go through a network, they will go through some intermediate nodes to reach the destination. So, this for this stream we have to route this, that is one problem, and the other thing is that maybe they are all the stream rides on some particular wavelength at the time for the time being, let us assume that it is continues on the same wavelength sorry, same wavelength. So, we have to assign one wavelength to it. So, we have this problem of routing and wavelength assignment in WDM all optical networks. Okay. Of course, we can do routing etc. very easily in the electronic domain, that is known, and routing in the electronic domain, how it is done etc. we are not discussed this as yet, we will discuss it later on in the in this series of lectures. But routing, I mean we are talking about a simple kind of routing problem here. So, we will talk about routing and wavelength assignment. So, in optical WDM networks, future backbone for wide area networks, that is the reason we wanted, because as the bandwidth demand from the users is going up at a very fast rate sorry. So, the we have of course, we have to go for fiber, we have to go for higher speed, and then we have to pack in a lot of these channels over the same fiber. So, we require and optical WDM networks. The speed of electronics compared to optics is a major constraint at the backbone. Sorry. So, it is always preferable to handle the traffic at the optical layer, where we can achieve much higher speed, and sort of the whole thing is transparent. The physical topology that we will consider are the optical wavelength routers connected by some fiber links. So, these are the same kind of topology we have talked about, that means there are some nodes which are connected by some communication links. In this particular case, the communication links happens to be optical fibers. So, most of the node pairs in the backbones are not physically connected. Okay. So, say we have 30 or 40, let us say 40 nodes. Now, for 40 nodes, there are 780 possible pairs, that is 40 C2, that is 40 into 39 by 2, that is 780 sorry, yeah, 780 pairs, which is a very large number. Of course, there will only be a few nodes which are connected actually through physical fibers. So, they can reach each other only through other intermediate nodes. A light path or connection, this is the concept that we will be talking about most in this this part of the lecture, which is a light path. It is a path between two end nodes and a wavelength on that path. So, we want to route, that means we want to find this path between the two end nodes, and we want to select a wavelength on which to send all our communication from the source node to the destination node. The intermediate nodes can cross connect the that particular wavelength from the incoming fiber to the outgoing fiber. So, you remember what is remember our discussion about digital cross connect. So, maybe through MEMS, that means through movable mirrors and all. So, a particular wavelength is coming through one particular fiber, we direct it through some mirror to another fiber on that same wavelength. It is as simple as that. Thus, with programmable optical switches, the traffic can be routed entirely in the optical plane. So, this is our holy grail actually. So, no wavelength conversion for the present, and any light path uses the same wavelength on all the links its path spans. So, 16 or 32 wavelengths in each fiber are common these days, and hundreds of lambdas are being talked about. A single fiber could theoretically accommodate as many light paths. So, what are the basic concepts of the light path? End users use light paths to communicate. Each light path passing along the same fiber occupy different wavelengths. That means, on the same fiber there may be different light paths going through the same fiber, each of them will be riding on a different wavelength or different lambda. Two light paths with the same wavelength cannot share a fiber. That means, two different light paths who are on the same wavelength, they cannot have any fiber in common, because then their signals will get mixed up with each other. Of course, we can have WDM with wavelength conversion also, as I mentioned in the previous lecture, that wavelength conversions are possible, although they are quite costly. So, it is possible in different and they are possible in different extents. For example, none, that means no wavelength conversion, or we can have a partial wavelength conversion, that means some of the nodes have WC capabilities while others do not have, or it may be full, that means all of them. So, if we have wavelength conversion, we get some kind of flexibility in routing and wavelength assignment. We will not consider that, but you can understand that if we can could convert the wavelength midway, and that means as the signal is going, we can convert the signal midway, then maybe we can have a better possibility of accommodating many more light paths. For our purpose, we will be considering only without wavelength conversion. So, how to establish light paths? Two parameters to be decided: path from source to destination, this is the routing part, and wavelength along the path, which is the wavelength assignment part. Traffic types subjected to optical networks may be static or dynamic. That means, you know the requirements. Static means you know the requirements, and the requirements remain static. For example, that means, yes, by requirement I mean that you know the specific source destination pairs which have to be connected in advance, and that is quite stable. And so, you now maybe run some centralized algorithm kind of thing and find the best way to assign the light paths. The other situation could be dynamic. Dynamically, there is a request from some node for a connection to some other node, and you want to set up the light path on the fly and then maybe take it down. Okay, that is a slightly more complex situation. So, two versions of RWA is realized depending on the characteristics of the applied traffic applied: static light path establishment or dynamic light path establishment. Now, routing and wavelength assignment. Several signals can share a same fiber. All signals must have different wavelengths. So, these are the constraints, and of course, also technology sets the upper limit to the number of wavelengths. You cannot have unlimited number of wavelengths. You can have a large number these days, but even then this is not unlimited. So, that these are the constraints which you will have to sort of respect while doing the routing and wavelength assignment. The problem is how to choose a route and a wavelength to each connection, so that signals will not block each other. So, how can signals block each other? The signals can block each other in this way. For example, suppose two particular source destination pair you have routed in a certain manner using a certain wavelength, let us say lambda 1. Now, another pair of source destinations, this was let us say N1, N2, then we want to put a connection between N3, N4, for which the route happens to share some of the links, and in these links. So, now since this is some of the links, now you cannot use lambda 1 for this, because lambda 1 on those links is already occupied by the link from N1 to N2. So, for N3 to N4, if they share the path, if the two paths shares even one link, you cannot use the same lambda 1, you will have to use some other lambda, maybe lambda 2, but then lambda 2 may be blocked because of some other links and so on. Okay. So, the objective of SLE, that is static light path establishment, is to minimize the total number of used wavelengths connecting the maximum number of nodes. So, they are the same. If you can connect some particular set of nodes using the minimum number of wavelengths, similarly, so you can, using the number of wavelengths which are given to you, maybe you can connect the maximum number of nodes. Other objective functions may also consider the load in the most loaded link, the total number of optical switches, etc., etc. So, this is an example of a light path establishment. Suppose you have these A, B, C, D, E, these are connected. So, in the first part, left half of the figure, what we have is the physical connections. From A to B there is a connection, B to D there is a connection, and so on. In this one, I show some something, that means some RWA, that means routing and wavelength assignment has already been done, and some of the wavelengths and some of the links have been used. So, here only 2 wavelengths are used. Let us say A to B, they are not connected. Say A to C. A to C, a light path has been established via B. So, and at B there will be a switch which will switch suppose this dashed line is the lambda 1. So, the lambda 1 coming through this fiber from A to B, that is switched to lambda 1 when using the same wavelength to the outgoing fiber from B to C. So, we have a light path established between B to C. Similarly, C to D there is a light path, B to D there is a light path, D to E there is a light path, A to F there is a light path, D to F there is a light path, and so on, using the same lambda 1. Then I want to connect E to C. Now, I cannot go from E to C after say lambda 1 has been sort of assigned. I cannot go but from E by lambda 1 to anywhere, because all the outgoing fibers, the lambda 1s have been used up, this side for A, this side for B, and this side for F. Sorry. So, in order to connect from E to C, I use another wavelength, say lambda 2, which connects me via D. So, in the D, the cross connect will connect this particular lambda from this fiber to this fiber. So, we will get a direct light path from E to C. Similarly, we will get a light path from B to F using lambda 2, A to D using lambda 2, and this way they are all connected. So, a large number of, as you can see, that a large number of light paths have been established using just 2 lambdas. Dynamic light path establishment, on the other hand, is appropriate for network having dynamic traffic, where the traffic pattern changes very dynamically. The communication request may arrive at any time. Goal is to maximize the number of incoming communication requests accepted. Well, if it so happens that you have already made some kind of reservation and some kind of allocation to earlier request, and then when a new request comes, you find that there are no paths on which a lambda is consistently free throughout. So, in that case you will have to block that request or regress that request. So, we want to minimize such regrets and maximize the number of incoming communication requests that can be accepted. That is the goal of DLE. Now, in order to solve this problem, what is the complexity of the problem? This problem is hard. The RWA problem is difficult. The problem can be divided into 2 sub problems, routing and wavelength assignment. Both of these sub problems are NP complete and tightly linked together. If you remember, by NP complete we mean that class of problems for which no polynomial time algorithm is known, so if you can solve any one of them, if complete means if it is you can solve any one of them in polynomial time, all others can be solved in polynomial time. It is not known that whether any polynomial time algorithm exists, but since the number of such problems is so large and people have thought about these problems in so many different guises, that it is very unlikely that you would suddenly come up with a polynomial time solution to any of these. And of course, when an algorithm has an exponential complexity, it takes a lot of time. So, that is a problem. So, this is a difficult problem in that sense, both its parts are NP complete. So, there is no exact solution. So, we do not want cannot expect to get the so called ideal solution or the optimal solution in all cases, but we can try good heuristics. Now, what do we want from a good algorithm? Maximize the number of connections, use the shortest routes and minimize the number of wavelengths. If we can maximize the number of connections, this is of course our basic requirement. If we use the shortest route, so the number of hops would be minimum, so delays and all kinds of things would be minimum, so that is another good thing to have. And if we minimize the number of wavelengths that has been used, so future requests can also be accommodated possibly. So, for routing there are different techniques like fixed routing, that means path is used one that is predefined, that means for all pairs we find sort of decide on some fixed paths, and fixed alternate routing means multiple predefined paths, one is selected, alright, one of them is selected. So, the criteria could be shortest path, least loaded path, least congested path and so on. Or there could be adaptive routing techniques, path is found on the fly, that means as the network is in operation, dynamically you find the maybe the least congested path or the most suitable path depending on the current situation in the network, and the shortest path, least loaded path, once again these may be we may try to find. Now, how do wavelengths affect the routing? There cannot be two signals with the same wavelength per fiber for two different light paths, that is not possible. So, the shortest route may be blocked by other signal, and in the worst case all the routes are blocked. Then of course, you I mean either you will have to reassign the wavelengths of other earlier assignments, or you will have to block this request. If the wavelength conversion is possible, the signal can use other free wavelengths, but the conversion is not always supported. Wavelength assignment problem arises under the wavelength continuity constraint, that means the wavelength has to be continuously available in all the links down the line, and there are various algorithms for this. One of the most commonly used one is the first fit. In the first fit, that means you sort of find the say you have decided on the path by some means, that is the routing part. Now, once you have decided on the path, you have a list of these wavelengths, say lambda 1 to lambda n, and you try them in order, and whichever wavelength is I mean the first wavelength which is free on all the links on in the route, that is the one which is assigned to the this particular light path request. Okay, that is called first fit, and it has some good points in the sense that some of the, since you are always trying from the same end, what you will do is that you tend to use up these earlier lambdas more and more, giving you very good utilization of the lambdas which you are using. So, a lot of other lambdas which you may be having in the network, so you have them on reserve to accommodate further requests. So, that is a that is the first fit algorithm, but then again you must remember that this is just a heuristic, in the sense that I mean there is no way you can prove, as a matter of fact you can disprove that in some cases this will not give you optimal algorithm. In some cases they may give you optimal algorithm. In many of the cases it has been found that this gives fairly good results, but in some cases you may get very bad results. It may be random. Okay, you may want to sort of distribute your load all over, so you may use a random one. People have used least used, that means the least used lambda, that means the lambda which is most free, that is the one which is picked up for when you try one by one all the lambdas, the lambda that can fit this particular route. So, this will have the opposite effect, in the sense that this will try to distribute the load evenly across all the lambdas, okay, or the most used one first, need not be the first fit, or the least loaded, etc. So, these are the different algorithms or different heuristics which you might use for assigning your lambda. Of course, what you could do is also that at some point you could go back and instead of and ask your that routing part, and that instead of this path, can you give me the next alternative path. So, from the shortest path which it might have given in the first instance, it might give you the second shortest path, which you may try to sort of assign, I mean try the same kind of wavelength assignment using that. So, all kinds of combinations of this routing and wavelength, these strategies are possible. Now, what is the for this wavelength routing, this is the kind of thing we are doing. What are the pros? That means, what are the good points about it? Setting up a light path or an L path is like setting up a circuit. Okay. You remember that we had talked about circuit switch network and packet switch networks. So, in circuit switch network specifically, the telephone circuits, at least in the even today, maybe a majority of it, they are circuit switch. That means, when you call from one node to another, that means one caller to one callee, a continuous circuit is set up. All those things have become more complicated, as we have seen, because of these TDM and all kinds of packets and all these things coming in between. But anyway, the essential circuit switching is that circuit is fixed. So, just in the same manner, when we are assigning a particular light path to two nodes which are to be connected, so this is just like setting up a circuit, and once the light path is set up, that means the route is fixed and the wavelength is assigned and the light path is set up, then these two nodes can communicate, I mean pumping whatever as many packets as they like through this. I mean, of course, they are limited by the technology constraint, but this is quite a high constraint. So, this is all the advantages, inherent advantages of setting up of this circuit switching that you get in this particular approach to the problem. Specifically, the quality of service is good. What we mean by the quality of service is good, it is good for smooth traffic, and QoS guarantee can be given due to fixed bandwidth reservation and all that, and SLE is easy to manage. That means static light path establishment, that is easy to manage. That is the advantage of wavelength routing. The disadvantages or the cons are the following: long circuit setup time. Okay. So, this circuit setup time will be in the order of tens of milliseconds. Okay. Actually, the way these circuits are set up is that the source sends some request, and the request goes down. All the nodes on the way, they have to, first of all, I mean they have to do their own local switches have to be set up in that particular fashion, and then they will acknowledge and say that okay, the light path has been set up. So, all this communication takes of the order of tens of milliseconds. Okay. Now, tens of milliseconds, it may be a lot of time or not that much, depending on the situation. All right. When a very high speed communication is going on, then tens of milliseconds is a lot of time. But if you are going to use set up a light path and then use it maybe for 1 month, okay, or 1 year, then tens of milliseconds may not be much. So it depends on the situation, but if your traffic is changing dynamically and then you want to adapt your what light paths you want to assign, etc., in a dynamic fashion, then tens of milliseconds may be a lot of time. And the other problem is that the huge capacity of 1 lambda, okay, 1 lambda can carry how much traffic? Well, maybe of the order of, let us say, 2.5 gigabits per second or something like that, or maybe even more these days. So, 1 lambda, so its capacity is very huge. The point is for just 2 nodes communicating, it may be a gross underutilization if proper traffic grooming is not done at the edge. What do we mean by traffic grooming? You remember that that at the edge, first of all, when we are talking about the edge, that means we are talking about a backbone network, which is where usually all your WDM systems will be deployed. So, we have this backbone network, and these backbone networks are being fed by all different networks or routers from all different networks, etc. So, a number of streams are coming into this backbone network, they are sort of converging and then traveling through the backbone and then going out on the other side. So, the routers which communicate with this backbone, they are the edge routers, and at this edge router, if you now the light path you have got from N1 to N2, as we have seen that its granularity is quite coarse, that means it is a quite a high amount of traffic can be handled. So, if the edge router sort of gets together a number of streams from different sources maybe and then uses it, there is a good traffic grooming. So, it loads it quite well, and then that is good. So, you are achieving high efficiency. If it is maybe two single users on the two ends, then it is a gross underutilization of this lambda. Unfortunately, in this circuit inherently you cannot have less than 1 lambda for a circuit if you are setting up a circuit at all. So, you have that capacity, but you are underutilizing it. This is the same problem that we had seen in circuit switching versus packet switching, and as a matter of fact there is a development, as we will see, for the packet switching part also, which we will see in the next half of this lecture. So, it is bandwidth inefficient for bursty traffic. This is another term that you should know. That means, if you remember, I told you when discussing about the telephone traffic that the Bell telephones people had done a lot of study about the what kind of traffic, for how long do people talk, for how frequently they talk at different times of the day, etc. And we know that this is some kind of an Poisson distribution with exponential interarrival time, etc. So, that is those are very well behaved kind of systems. Unfortunately, in recent years the study first of all the voice traffic has shrunk to maybe less than 5% of the overall traffic in the network. 95% of it is data traffic, and this data traffic has been seen to be very bursty. Okay. They also follow some kind of statistics, but it is a complicated kind of statistics. The whole thing is that the data traffic seems to come in bunch. When they come, a lot of packets are coming, and then for a long time there is no traffic. Okay. It is also self similar, and it is a rather complex kind of statistics, but and then anyway the point is, for the long time for which when it is not sending anything, the circuit is remaining unutilized. So, this is a gross underutilization of the circuit. So, the busy time versus the lean time may be of the ratio of 1:500, okay, something like that. So, that is why this becomes an inefficient way. So, either wasted bandwidth during off or low traffic periods for SLE, or too much overhead, that is delay due to frequent setup release of in dynamic light path establishment. That means, if you want to say put it down and then set it up again, but in that time frame this becomes too much of an overhead, because if you remember that for setting up a light path we require maybe tens of milliseconds. So, you cannot do it very fast. And particular lambda path specific pros and cons is that it is a very coarse granularity, as we have discussed, OC48 and above. So, OC48, if you remember, is about 2.5 gigabits per second or above that. Limited number of wavelengths, thus number of light paths, no aggregation, that is merging of light paths inside the core. So, inside the core there cannot be any aggregation, etc. Traffic grooming can only be done at the edge. So, this may be complex or inflexible. That OXC they have this millisecond kind of switching time. So, that is these are the pros and cons of lambda paths. So, this takes us to the next half of our lecture, where we will have a look at the other way, other approach to this whole problem, namely optical burst switching. Okay. Just as the previous one was circuit switching, so we were doing a circuit switching, we are setting up light paths. So, here what we will do, we will try to take the packet route, that means that we will send them packet by packet, and how that can be done, because originally the packets may have sorry originated from some say TCP IP or Ethernet or some computers, say small kinds of packets. So they are so doing it at that particular level becomes difficult at the optical level. So we have some technology for that. So we will look at this. So now we discuss the next topic, which is optical burst switching. First of all, one quick comparison between electronic versus optical switching. Data is transmitted optically in WANs, MANs, and even some LANs. All right. Electronic switching uses digital switching fabrics, converts data from optical to electronic for switching, and then from electrical to optical for transmission. Okay. Now that means we are over here what we are doing is that you are trying to do the switching in the electronic domain. Okay. As mentioned a number of times before, that electronic switching always has a problem. At high speeds it is very costly, and also this is not very easily upgradable, scalable, etc., etc. So that is a problem, but if you had done the switching in the electronic domain, there would be no problem. I mean, just the kind of switching and the kind of logic, kind of algorithms that we use in other parts of the network, they could be put over there. But that is but we want to avoid electronic switching, we want to do optical switching as much as possible. So let us see how that can be done. The cost of electronic switching goes up steeply as the speed requirement increases, and optical or photonic switching uses optical switching fabrics, keeps data in the optical domain. So why not we keep the status quo, that means that do the switching in the electronic domain only? Well, the trouble is that the data traffic growth is still doubling every year, okay, and this, mind you, is different from what we have in the computing domain. Okay, in the computing domain our Moore's law says that it doubles maybe 1.5 years, okay, and this is doubling every year. And actually if you see over the long range, although the computational speed has increased manyfold, but the communication speed has grown even by an even larger amount, okay, by an order of magnitude more maybe. Sorry. So the point is that the electronics is unable to sort of move at that, I mean the development is it is not possible to develop it at that particular rate of development. So pure electronic processing and switching can hardly keep up. Electronic demands space, power consumption, heat dissipation, etc. These are always problems, because heat dissipation is more, it requires more space, etc., etc. And there is no transparency. No transparency means that it is it depends on the kind of system, the kind of modulation system, the kind of multiplexing system that you are using, which you will have to use in that electronic component. So when the technology moves on, these intermediate nodes will also have to be changed, whereas the optical switching, since it is transparent, it does not matter if you change what you are sending through that pipe. So the cost factor, of course, I mean weighs the heaviest. Though the cost of OUO at OC48 is going down, the overall cost including WDM system at OC48 is still a dominant factor. So OUO at OC192 and higher in the future will still be a dominant cost factor. So we want to go to optical switching, whose advantages are that it has low cost and high capacity, transparency, that means it is independent of bit rate, format, protocol, etc. It is synergetic to the optical transmission and future proof. That means when we upgrade, all these things might change, but my intermediate node will not change in the optical switch. OPEC, that is OUO switches, are more mature and reliable, of course. So still need some electronic processing and control. That means even when we are doing it in the optical domain, we still require some electronic processing and control. What we do is we try to minimize this part, and optical 3R or performance monitoring are hard. Okay. If you remember that we can amplify a signal quite easily, but if we want to go all the 3R, that means regenerate, reshape and retime, then we prefer to take it to the electronic domain. Packet switching. The packet contains a header, that means as if, for example, addresses and the payload, which is a variable or fixed length. Can be now a packet switching, the advantage is that it is some kind of statistical multiplexing. It can be sent without circuit setup delay. If the line is there, you can just simply send it. Statistical sharing of link bandwidth among packets with different source destination. So, that makes it more efficient. Okay, bandwidth usage is more efficient. So, packet switching is done usually this way, that store and forward at each node, buffers a packet, processes its header and sends it to the next hop. This is how usually it is done in the electronic domain. We will look at the details of this later on, but usually what would happen is that you remember that in a circuit, when we are using circuit switching, the circuit is set up from end to end and then we can send whatever we like. But when it comes to packet switching, so that since it is coming packet by packet and each packet has to be processed independently. So, we have to look at this packet, look at its header, see what is the destination, decide on which next link to take, etc., and send it. So, we have to store this packet in a buffer and then examine it, do some processing and then forward it. This is the store and forward paradigm. Okay. So, this is usually done in packet switching. We have some problems with that in the optical domain, as we will see, and this does statistical multiplexing. This is inherently bandwidth efficient. Now, if you have a packet core, we have in the access or metro networks, optical buses, passive star couplers, etc., they are being used. Sonnet, WDM rings or token rings are used. We will talk about token rings later. Switched networks or gigabit Ethernet. So, these are the kind of technology that is deployed in the LAN MAN side, whereas in the WAN side we have lambda routed virtual topology, that is circuits or leased lines. We have dynamic lambda provisioning, that means circuits on demand, and optical bus switching, which we are talking about now. So, the technology drivers for this is that explosive traffic growth, as I already mentioned, bursty traffic pattern, and to increase bandwidth efficiency, to make the core more flexible. Naturally, a packet system would be more flexible than those fixed light path kind of system, to simplify network control and management and making the core more intelligent. Now, how important is this bandwidth efficiency? We are always talking about the bandwidth efficiency. How important is it? Well, there are two views to this. One is the user's point of view. Well, user is wanting some bandwidth today, but if the bandwidth becomes cheaper and as it becomes available, he will immediately think of another application which will and his bandwidth demand will grow. Okay. Previously, people were very happy to send some simple text. Okay. Now they are downloading, then they want to download song files. Now they want to download entire videos. Then they will try to do video conferencing all with each other. So, these are very bandwidth intensive applications and they require a lot of bandwidth. So, from the user's point of view, the more the bandwidth you give, I will bring in lot more applications and I will just use it up. So, with more available bandwidth, new bandwidth intensive applications will be introduced. And high bandwidth is like an addictive drug, can't have too much of bandwidth from the user's point of view. From the carriers or the vendors point of view, expenditure rate is higher than revenue growth sometimes. So, longer term equipment investment cannot keep up with the traffic explosion. So, you have to see that whatever I invest today, how long into the future I can take it, so that my investment is lower. So, we need bandwidth efficient solutions on the infrastructure today that is existing today, to be competitive. So, these are the different issues which brought us to optical packet switching or optical burst switching. I will come to that, but this is our goal. But the major problem, there are two problems really, and one of them is that lack of optical buffer. Okay. And the optical domain, some packet is coming means some light pulses are coming. Now, how do you store them in the optical domain? Okay. So, there is no good buffer for optical domain. There is a thing called fiber delay lines, and this is really a bulky and not very good stuff. So, what you can do is that you can put it in the fiber delay line, as it comes goes to that fiber delay line and comes out of the other end, the whole thing will be delayed a little bit. Okay. So, that is something akin to buffering it, but there are serial limitations on how much you can delay, that is one thing. Secondly, it is bulky, expensive and not very good. All right. So, fiber delay lines are bulky and provide only limited and deterministic delays. Store and forward with feedback FDLs leads to fixed packet length and synchronous switching. So, we can, because of this, simple store and forward we cannot use. And the other thing is the tight coupling of header and payload requires stringent synchronization and fast processing and switching. So, these things are difficult. So, we go to this optical burst switching or OBS. A burst has a long and variable length payload. So, why do we first of all variable length payload, that means we want to keep it as flexible as possible, that is one good aspect of it, and that means we want to keep it as flexible as possible. The other thing is that we want it to be long. Why is it long? Because we have to do some processing, some setting up etc. for this burst of packets to travel. So, what we do is that in the electronic domain we do some grooming, we sort of collect a number of packets together forming a burst which have the same source destination pair, and then we set up the path and send this burst along all in the optical domain. So, that is the essential approach to optical burst switching. So, a burst has a long and variable length payload. If it is long, so low amortized overhead and no fragmentation. A control packet is sent out of band, that means using some other lambda control, and reserves bandwidth, that is lambda data, it reserves a particular bandwidth along a particular path and configures the switches. So, it is like setting up a temporary light path from the source to the destination. A burst is sent after an offset time. It arrives at a switch after it has been configured. So, no buffering is needed. So, our original problem is of not having optical buffers or buffers in the optical domain, that is avoided in this fashion. So, we have to do a burst assembly or disassembly at the edge, and the source side, that means the client data, maybe the IP packets which are the most dominant ones, they are assembled together into bursts. And burst switching or reservation protocol, that means we send the control packet sent an offset time t ahead of the burst. So, this within this offset time all the switches down the line will sort of do their programming, that means they will do their, they will set up all their I mean mirrors or whatever it is, their cross connects etc. So, that later on when the burst does arrive, we do not have to do any processing on them, and if you do not have to do any processing on them, we do not need to store them either. Okay. So, they can go straight away in the optical domain, and dedicated control channel which is out of band signaling for the control packets. So, the basic so the advantage is that no fiber delay lines nor OEO conversion for burst at any intermediate nodes. Photonic burst switching fabric inside the core, that means it leverages best of optics for burst switching and electronics for control packet processing and fabric control. So, just for the control part we do this OEO, and for the other part, for the bulk of it, the burst, we do not have to go to the electronic domain at all. So, this is a diagram, say assembly queues for different nodes different egress nodes, so are going into different this thing. This is an ATM cell, IP packet or a SONET. So, we have an IP packet over here, we have maybe a SONET frame over there, because if you are sending things, so this is the good thing about optics, you see that if you are sending them in the purely in the optical plane, we do not really care what the payload contains. Okay, it may be an IP packet, it may be a SONET frame, it may be some cell, it may be anything else, we really do not care. We are sort of the intervening optics is transparent to all that. Okay. So, what happens is that maybe we use this ATM cell for the control packet purpose. So, we make a control packet. So, we make a control packet which assembles a bursts, and as it assembles a burst, it knows what is the time or length threshold is reached. So, up to that time, so it knows the length of the burst. The length of the burst may be variable, as we said that the burst would be long and variable length, but all these different IP packets, frames, SONET frames, etc., they are put together. Then what happens is that a control packet is generated and sent out. So, a control packet is, so the control packet now knows the source, it knows the destination, it knows the length of the burst. So, it sends through a separate control channel. So, this control channel goes through the control plane, as we will see. So, we are assembling the so we have these assembly queues for different egress nodes. By egress nodes, that means we mean that the destination. If for different destinations, we will have different queues over here. For different destinations, all these packets, frames, etc., are getting queued up and forming into bursts. So, fiber delay line, I just mentioned it. So, this is this thing of fiber delay line, feed forward or feed backward. So, no optical ROM for store and forward. So, FDL provides only limited delay and cannot perform most useful buffer functions. So, FDL units are bulky, affect signal quality, etc. Now, going back to this OBS, we have various schemes, and various schemes are still evolving. This is an active area of research. So, I will just present a simple scheme called just enough time or JET. Now, an offset time between CP and burst. So, what is done is that first the control packet is sent and if you remember that the control packet is sent, and after the control packet there is a delay, we keep a delay and then we send the burst. So, this delay is to cover all the programming time on the intervening nodes. So, an offset time between CP and burst. No fiber delay line is required to delay the burst when CP is processed and switch fabric is configured. CP carries the burst length info, facilitates delayed reservation for intelligent efficient allocation of bandwidth, and FDL if any, including look ahead scheduling, etc. So, we need not go into these details here. So, we have the control packet here which is moving in the control plane. We have the burst over here and there is an offset time t, and this is just enough offset, that is the jet which we require for programming these intervening optical nodes. So, CP arrives at OIO at time, let us say T1. But the control packet is being, if you note that the control packet is being taken to the electronic domain for processing, because this is because this will have to be processed, etc. So, it is better done in the electronic domain. Then CP goes through the optical to electrical conversion and configure the switch fabric, and then it will move on. CP goes through EO conversion and leaves the OEO node at time T1 plus delta, alright. So, what will happen is that this will now moving towards the other end to the next node, and here this will again do some go through the O to E and then do the switch configuration, and then again E to O and go to the next hop, and this delay etc. is calculated in such a fashion that when the burst arrives, what happens is that when the burst arrives at the intermediate node, the switch fabric is already configured. So, you do not have to store it, it simply passes through in the optical domain. So, that is nice. So, offset of course now is t minus delta, because it spent delta amount of time over here. So, without any delay the burst goes through the optical switch fabric. So, depending on how many intervening nodes are there, you have to have this original t, so that finally when this t is exhausted or offset is exhausted, but you have also reached your destination, that is just enough time. And finally, to conclude, OBS is a promising switching paradigm that offers many advantages over the existing technologies, but is not likely to be the end all kind of solution. OBS has several variations, and adopting OBS will be an evolutionary process. This is another problem, that when you have a new scheme and there are I mean, you know, the different researchers will try to do research, come up with different suggestions, and then at different places some different things may be adopted. Okay. But then in order for the entire network to work in a very smooth fashion, you have to come to some standards. So, OBS has not come to that standards yet, but it is a quite a promising approach. And so now we have talked about the two approaches in WDM, namely this circuit switching part, that is the light path routing and wavelength assignment and setting up of light paths, and we have talked about optical burst switching. In the next lecture we will see, you remember that that the SONET infrastructure, the SONET we had talked about, that is also a lot of it is in fiber optics. Okay. And then we have all these fiber optic, that means packet oriented fiber optic infrastructures are also coming in, that means large routers etc. are coming into the picture. One thing we did not discuss, while although we mentioned it while discussing SONET, was that this has an inherent capacity of fault recovering from fault. So, that is one thing that we would like to discuss in the next lecture. This is not only in SONET, in optical networks in general, how do we handle faults, and that is very important, you know, because these optical network is at the core of the network, and if the core of the network fails, its repercussion is tremendous, both economic and other repercussions may be tremendous. So, we like to put in a lot of reliability into all these fiber infrastructure that we have, and how exactly that is done, that we will discuss in the next lecture. Thank you.